pushed back multiple times to like 2030 or something. $80 billion now.
Good afternoon, everybody. By the way, you got more snow here than we did up in Indianapolis, so I don't know what that means, but evidently we just got a lot more rain, I think. But welcome, everybody, to our Bloomington Rotary celebration of service this afternoon. I want to thank Sally for greeting everybody on her birthday, by the way. Happy birthday, Miss Sally. And our roundabout reporter, Mr. Lon Barker, will be capturing the meeting notes today. I'm Lauren Snyder, president of this wonderful group of people. And I want to invite Mr. Tim Jessen up for our pledge and reflection. Tim.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You can be seated. A few days ago, I asked for a final interview with my current boss, Mr. Salzberg here, whom we'll hear later, and he was kind enough to grant it. And in a thank you note to him, I remarked that the preacher's task is sometimes expressed as to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. To my surprise, he replied that that also is often quoted as the job of the newspaper and the task of the journalist. A Google search proved that to be the case, as a columnist in the 19th century had a column named Mr. Dooley originated the quote. Now, 20th century theologian Reinhold Niebuhr also claims credit for it, but in either case, it's a good one. The newspaper often has to comfort, as it did recently in sharing the sadness and grief of one of our members. But it also tries, and most often does, challenge us in our beliefs and our thoughts and our actions. If we read the newspaper and there's nothing in there that causes us to question and think, well, then it's not doing a very good job. Mr. Salzberg has produced a great one, and that's my moment to say that. But it also seems to me that Rotary also does both things, or at least it should. We comfort ourselves around the table, sometimes about the latest IU loss or losses. It didn't come up at our table at all for half an hour. And we wonder when things will get on track again, or we discuss the latest political news while trying not to be partisan, and we are challenged. And regardless of who the speaker is, whether it's someone from a nonprofit or an IU professor or a travelogue from some distant land, we ask questions, sometimes challenging the speaker, sometimes affirming, but always trying to move out of our comfort zone and think about another point of view. So we will do today. Whether it's the comfort from the cold by being here together, or asking the hard and difficult questions about a contemporary issue, that's how we grow. And thanks to the Herald Times and our Rotarian friend for helping us to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Always do a wonderful job with that. Now I want to invite Winston up to introduce I believe we have several guests. So, Winston.
Thank you very much. We have 7 guests today that I would like to introduce and welcome them to Rotary. And I'd ask, as I announce your name, if you would stand so that we can properly recognize you. I think it's kind of a special day. We have 3 spouses here, so I'm just going to start with that. Mary Jensen, spouse of Ron. Ann Bright, spouse Jim. And then we have Jane Perry, John Hobson. In addition, we have Ken Bykoff, who is a guest of Jim Shea. William Smith, a guest of Trent Decker. And then we have 3 more guests of Jim Bright, Jan Steinblick, Elizabeth Thompson. I should mention that Elizabeth, as many of you know, is a former Rotarian. She served as co-chair of the 2016 district conference, I believe. And also, I know Elizabeth because she was the one that we worked on volunteers in medicine and got that started. So Elizabeth, it's good to have you back. If any of you are interested in membership, please contact one of the fellow Rotarians or at the table, and we'd be glad to have you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Winston, and welcome to everybody. Old friends, new friends, always good to have you and see some new and familiar faces at our celebrations of service. Our Rotary family, first and foremost, good to see Charlotte. And Charlotte, I know you've been in all of our thoughts and minds, so great to see you here. Some birthday, we only have one birthday, and that is Miss Sally, which I recognize already. Happy birthday today, Sally. And membership anniversaries, we have Miss Judy Witt. I believe it's 30 years of membership here, past president and district governor of our district. So, Judy. All right, some quick announcements. Don't forget our district conference for April 27th in Clarksville. Still want to get a list of people who go so we can make sure to get those matching dollars, the district engagement grant. Our It Takes a Village resource fair for parents, infants, and toddlers in collaboration with the other 2 clubs will be on May 18th. We are having, and it's at the warehouse, we're having a meeting this afternoon at the warehouse, just starting to get more of the details coordinated. And Jessica Hain from the Sunrise Wednesday Club is leading the charge there. Our third quarter Lunch Buddies program is now available. I believe Natalie has a hard copy. If you don't know who your lunch buddy is or weren't able to get it electronically, check the list sometime, grab coffee, lunch, something. And Bob Zaltzberg here's, and he's my lunch buddy for this quarter. So he's going to have some time on his hands, so I know I'm going to be able to grab him. So board meeting this past Thursday, had a really productive meeting and actually got out a little bit early. So thanks to those who attended that meeting. Our program committee will meet today after the meeting. So Jim and Michael will be leading the charge there, filling in a couple holes that we have for the remainder of this Rotary year, which is incredible. So meet with them after that. Our next Rotary 505, which is on, I think there's a flyer on each of your tables, will be the 31st at 5:05 at Nick's. And bring a guest, bring a spouse, bring whomever you would like just to socialize with your Rotary friends and family. And I think that is it from the announcement side of things. Happy Dollars. Is Susie here? I thought I saw Susie. Susie, Happy Dollars. Anybody have anything they are excited or happy about? Yeah, Jim.
I have a challenge. I have $5 for my friendship for Bob Salzberg. As a professional, as an educator, there were many times that I called Bob and said, Bob, I need to talk. And he was always there. He was somebody that you could trust. For $5, can you make it 100?
Thank you, Bob, for all these years.
All right. Thank you, Linda. Anybody else? Bob. Yeah. Steve. All right. Yeah. Art in the back. Okay, we're going to Jeff. Are these for Bob? Are these all for Bob? All right. Bob, have you ever had so much money thrown at you?
My ethics would.
Yeah, his morals wouldn't allow him to do this. All right.
But now.
All right, does anybody have any? Here we go. Rex. Gus. Wow. I'm going to just let this keep happening. Keith Klein, I think, has got money. Good to see Keith. For Bob. Excellent. Gus, Winston, Joy.
He's on his way to Florida.
All right, Walt. Hanks, Walter, back there.
I don't need to break up the but my son won the city free throw shooting contest.
So does he go to state or regional? Or? Okay, great. They did. What were they? 1 of 8 at some point on Saturday. I mean, woo. Anybody else have anything exciting going on? Yeah, Judy.
I don't know that this is exciting, but I am so thrilled to know all of you people and to have had your support in what Rotary should, could, can, and is over these many years. And I thank you very much for everything that you do in the service above self in the name of Rotary.
Anybody else? Wonderful. Hey, that's not a quick count. That was a lot of money that came flying in. So, of course, the banker's throwing out how much? Yeah, right? I love it, Gene. Susie, report back. With no further ado, I want to invite Jim Bright up and give Bob as much time as I'm sure there'll be some questions. Is this for you, Bob?
Yeah.
Okay. Bob?
It's for the free throw shooter.
Okay. All right, Jim.
It is indeed a pleasure to introduce our man of the hour for this luncheon. I'm talking about our good friend and fellow Rotarian and Paul Harris Fellow, Bob Salzberg. In just a few days, as we all know, Bob will retire from the Herald Times, where he has worked for 42 years. With 33 years in his current position, Bob is the Dean of Indiana newspaper editors. And Bob started at the newspaper in 1976 as a mere lad, covering news and sports, and including high school football games where he tells me more than once he got soaked by rain. Since becoming editor in 1985, Bob has been involved in the local community in roles that he calls careful observer and constructive critic, hearkening back to what Tim Jessen shared with us. He has been involved in many state, regional, and national journalism organizations and seminars, and for the past 5 years, he has taught at the IU Media School media management, and this year he's teaching news editing there. Bob has been host of WFIU's Noon Edition for 20 years. That show is celebrating its 20th anniversary here in just this month. He's a graduate of Miami University of Oxford, Ohio, and he's a graduate of Winchester, Indiana Community High School in Winchester, Indiana. Bob is married to the lovely Susan Williams. He is stepdad to Amelia, and he's a dedicated companion to 3 dogs and 2 cats. Again, Bob has been a Rotarian since 1987. Please join me in a standing ovation for wonderful citizen Bob Salzberg.
Well, it's pretty overwhelming. I really appreciate all your support and all your kind words. I should start today by just thanking everybody here and saying that Rotary's been really good to me. Rotary's been much better to me than I've been to Rotary, I have to tell you. I have met so many great people and have gotten literally hundreds of stories or editorial ideas from coming to Tuesday meetings, either from those of you who pull me aside and slip me a note, or from all the programs that are always interesting and really good to listen to. So I want to tell you that I decided in 2017 that 2018 would be my last year as editor. Wasn't an easy decision, but it just seemed like everything was sort of aligning, and it was time for me to move aside. So for the last year, I've sort of been planning this departure along with our publisher, Corey Bollinger. But my decision was really driven home to me this fall about how there's a gap between me and my staff, and there might be a gap between me and some of you in the room, because we have a kind of a young group. When we were talking in a morning meeting, we have meetings every morning, and we were talking about the Associated Press. We were talking about word usage, grammar, style, because we talk about those things in our newsroom. And I mentioned one of my favorite stories from the old United Press International, UPI style book. Some of you may have heard this, but in the UPI style book, there was an entry to tell you the difference between usage of the word burrow. Burrow, B-U-R-R-O, is an ass. Burrow, B-U-R-R-O-W, is a hole in the ground. As a journalist, you're supposed to know the difference. So what sort of convinced me that maybe it was time for me to retire was that I didn't get that much laughter out of my staff. You guys were much better. But then Kurt Christian, one of our wonderful young reporters, sort of looked at me when I was saying, "Don't you guys think that's funny?" And he's like, "What's UPI?" For those young ones in the room, Associated Press and United Press International were the two mammoth news services until the mid-1990s, and Associated Press has really taken over. But a lot of my staff just wasn't aware of that, and I thought, maybe the time's right. There's been so much change in newspapering since I started in 1985. Actually started in 1975 in Plainfield, Indiana, where I first worked on a manual typewriter, got soaked on the sidelines of high school football games. The ones that Jim talked about were in Owen Valley. My first job, I was covering Owen Valley High School, and it seemed to rain every Friday night, and they didn't have a press box. So that's when I decided sports wasn't for me. But I worked on this manual typewriter, and of course technology has really changed over the years. And that's been probably the biggest change that technology has brought has been the opportunity for everybody to be a journalist in some way or another. And that's really changed the profession. It's changed the business model. It's changed how we do things every day. What's stayed the same in our newsroom and in newsrooms around the country, I trust, is that there's a commitment by those who believe in journalism, true journalism, local journalism, to report the truth for the benefit of the people who are reading the paper and for the community, the entire community that we serve. I hope you saw our Sunday paper, because we try to do this routinely. And on Sunday, we had two stories that I think do just that. And I'll mention them very briefly. Abby Tonsing had a story that was a follow-up on a tragic fire that killed a 2-year-old. And in that fire, there were no smoke detectors. So she looked into, she got all the city reports on violations for rental units, and then she found out that the county doesn't have anything similar. So this happened to be in the county. But the person that owned that particular rental home in the county, in the months of August and September, the city cited that landlord with 1,800 violations, including more than 100 for not having working smoke detectors in their units. That, to me, is really good public service journalism, and it's something that I'm proud that we did. In another story, the aforementioned Kurt Christian, we started getting reports of, if you know the Home to Suites hotel out on the north side of town, we started getting reports that all of the subcontractors weren't being paid. And so we looked into that, and in fact, there are a lot of local businesses that are on the hook for about $700,000. It's not an easy issue, though, because the hotel owner says it's the problem of the contractor, and the contractor says it's the problem of the hotel owner, And meanwhile, subcontractors like Able Nursery are owed, in the case of Able Nursery, $105,000. That's tough on a small business. So we're hoping that there'll be some sort of solution there. So I think local journalists can still do that kind of work and must do that kind of work to be relevant in their communities. But at the same time, we also have to continue to just monitor what's happening in City Hall, monitor the Justice Building and the courthouse, what folks like Jeff McKim are doing on a regular basis when he's not out with his drone. So, the neighborhoods, the schools, the sports teams, healthcare, what's going on with the environment, what's going on with the arts venues, and on and on and on. Now we're doing that in print. We're doing it online. We're doing it on your mobile devices. We're doing it on social media, and we're doing it with fewer staff members, which I'll get to in a minute. So, yeah, and we also are doing video now, and we started a podcast. If you haven't listened to our podcast, I recommend it. You can listen to me talk for 25 minutes on a podcast. And the most recent one, and Ken Bykoff should listen to this, it's about Chris Howell and David Snodgrass talking about shooting IU basketball games and some of the bizarre travels that they've had to shoot IU games when we used to fly on a private plane, a 6-person private plane with a guy that flew who was a former bomber in Vietnam. And, nothing scared him, but our guys were always terrified. So I would need like 6 months of Tuesday programs to cover the 33 years of being editor of the paper. But since I don't have that, I'm going to start with just an overview. I've got 4 different points I want to make. One, I'll try to do this in the next 10 to 15 minutes, so there'll be time for questions. Bloomington is a really special place to be a newspaper editor. It's a very smart, very progressive community. And they're experts on everything. It wasn't very long before I realized that I was never going to be the smartest person in the room. Somebody was always going to be more knowledgeable than I am or than our reporters are. And on every issue that we covered, it was really important to respect the fact that we had to learn where to go to get the information and to get to knowledge to be relevant when you've got experts taking shots at everything that you write. I learn something new in my job every day. And I mean that sincerely. It may have been, maybe a management lesson that didn't come from the outside, or it may be a lesson in, how to talk to a reader, or maybe a lesson in how not to talk to a reader. I kind of had one of those yesterday. It was one of those fake news callers, and it was not pleasant. But I think, I learned something new every day, including there are multiple sides to every story. We can't make assumptions without doing, our homework. And it's always important to know that people in Bloomington have tons of opinions and a lot of reasons to back them up. I may have told this story before, but there are a lot of new Rotarians every year. So the very first week I was on the job, I got 2 letters in the mail. And they landed on my desk the same day. They were about the same story. It was a story that was published in our paper from the New York Times News Service. In the first letter, I opened it up. These were both from people on the faculty at IU. In the first letter, I opened it up, and it was really nice. And I was like, I was all puffed up. The letter's like, Mr. Zaltzberg, I really appreciate that story from the New York Times on whatever the issue was. It's really good to see that the new newspaper editor is going to provide us with this kind of broad coverage of national and international news. And I was like, yeah, that's great. And then I opened the next one from another faculty member, and it said, if I want the New York Times, I'll buy the New York Times. Give me local news. And it was like, aha, okay. Then, there was a bit of a light bulb that kind of went off. And of course, local news is what we do, but we have such a broad audience that we're trying to cover, and we're never going to make everybody happy. So that's kind of the overview of being the editor in Bloomington and some of the, just a very brief mention of some of the challenges, but I want to mention some of the stories and the issues. Then I want to mention some of the great people, and then I want to offer kind of hope for a little bit of support. The stories. I see Charlotte sitting there. Charlotte ran for mayor in the primary in 1987. And the main issue at the time was PCBs. A lot of you in the room remember that. I became very, very proficient at saying polychlorinated biphenyls because that's what PCBs were. Some of you who are in the room know, some of you probably don't, that Bloomington has 5, 6, 7 Superfund sites because of contamination from PCBs. One company in town, Westinghouse, was responsible for it, and the city and the county and the state all tried to work together with Westinghouse, which became General Electric, which became CBS, which became eventually Siemens, but that was already over. This was already over, to try to solve that PCB problem. I was a young editor at the time. That was a really difficult issue. I think Charlotte can attest to that. There were different scientists on either side of the issue that were trying to come up with a solution, because Bloomington and Monroe County were kind of ground zero for one of the worst environmental catastrophes in the country. Trying to cover that issue with a small newsroom, we had to go to lots and lots of smart people to talk. And then there was a city council meeting one night where there was a group of people that really, Pat Gross, who used to be in this club, was on the city council. I remember she was, I think it would be fair to say she was pretty much terrified at what the people might do because they didn't want a PCB incinerator to go in south of town. Our newspaper, the editor prior to me, had supported the idea of an incinerator. And for the first, for a while I supported it too, because I thought, well, the scientists can't be wrong. They say it's going to be safe. And then there became more and more evidence that it may not be safe. And then it was more and more evident that the community would never accept it, a large portion. And so, we withdrew our support, which probably had nothing to do with anything other than made me feel better. And the incinerator was defeated. Charlotte kind of helped lead that charge. And I think we're all better off because that never happened. But that was an issue that went on for years in Bloomington and Monroe County, 12 years before the idea of the incinerator was basically defeated. And then the cleanup probably took another 5 or 6 years. So the 1981 National Championship in basketball, I wasn't the editor yet. But I can tell you that it was the same day that Ronald Reagan was shot. And I can tell you that the HT was the only newspaper in America and probably in the world that played the national championship game higher than the President of the United States being shot. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. And that's no commentary on our president, current president. That's local news. And I kind of laugh sometimes, and it's true. I mean, the president was out of danger. He truly was. They wouldn't have played the game. We wouldn't have had the issue if it had been if he'd been in more serious physical shape. But it was, it was definitely an interesting moment for our newspaper. Covering Bob Knight, thank goodness for Bob Hamill, our sports editor. I had a couple interactions with Knight, and they were pleasant enough, but really kind of confounding. I'm happy that I didn't really have to have a lot of interaction with him. He was, at this one time, he sold us a lot of newspapers, won a lot of basketball games, and at the other time, on the other side, he was a very divisive character in the community by the end of his time. For the most of the time Bob Knight was here, he had probably 80% support. As someone once said, he probably could have gone on the streets of Kirkwood, shot somebody, and his supporters would have still loved him. It's kind of not the same thing exactly. I don't think the other guy said Kirkwood. Another huge story, the story of Won Jun Yoon. Some of you were here, Korean graduate student, shot and killed going into his church. When people talk about, Bloomington being this wonderful, loving, progressive community, I don't disagree, but this is a community where hate really reared its head. I mean, it was 1999, I believe, and it was a white supremacist student at IU. I don't think he's a student any longer. He shot someone in Skokie, Illinois. He shot Jews in Skokie, Illinois. He shot a black man in Chicago who happened to be Ricky Birdsong, the coach of the Northwestern basketball team. Shot him and killed him. Drove back down to Bloomington and shot an Asian man walking into church. And then he was led on a police chase and shot himself in Illinois. What made it a challenging and interesting day for us was that it was on July 4th, which was on a Sunday, and we didn't have a paper schedule for Monday. So we did an extra. And I wrote about this a little bit this week, but we did an extra edition where people just came into the office. They heard about this news, and that's one thing about journalists. They want to be involved. They want to be in the forefront of what's happening. And we put out this extra because this guy was still out there. There was an idea they might have to cancel the 4th of July parade because who knew if the guy might want to attack the parade. There were police officers that were walking beside all the units that had anybody of color in the unit and most of the dignitaries. I'm going to have to speed up. All right. Yeah, there are several other stories on my list, but I want to get to the people next. Let me just say 9/11, that was huge. That was a huge, and another extra that we put out that day, because the internet wasn't what it is today. It wasn't nearly as robust as it is today. As far as people are concerned, I did a reflection on one of the people that, if people ask me who's the most interesting person I ever met in my job, I, without hesitation, say a woman named Mabel Gunther. And I did a reflection on her one day. She's a woman that, before there was Tuesdays with Maury, if you know the book reference, I had Tuesdays with Mabel. I talked to her every Tuesday and many Wednesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, and Mondays for 11 years. And the first time I talked to her was on a Tuesday, because I did this talk to the editor time. And Mabel, she just would go. She would talk, and she had this gravelly voice. She was 80 years old when I first started talking to her. And then one day, I was just sort of half listening, and I heard her say, truth is a prism that shattered at the top of the world, and all you ever find are the shards. Now, just think about that for a minute. And I thought, this person is somebody I need to listen to more carefully. So at that point, I just started taking notes. And I talked to her for another 10 years. I visited her a few times, and we just had quite a relationship. I wrote about it after she died. I went to the funeral and talked to her son. But these are, she's just a treasure of a person to be able to talk to. A couple of people in this club have meant a great deal to me. Charlotte's one of them. Harmon Baldwin is one of them. A lot of you are, but I want to mention Charlotte and Harmon. We're two community leaders that I always thought were focused on doing the right thing for the most people. And that was a message to me. And I got to say, Charlotte knows this. We've talked about this before. I was coming after a very conservative editor at the paper, and I sort of had some time I had to prove myself, and I also had to sort of shed some of what the HT had done before. And so I think there were some times when Charlotte and I were not on the same page. And I learned that usually it was I that was on the wrong page. And and if you didn't hear her, she says, "That's right." And it is right. Harmon Baldwin was my sponsor in Rotary, although he couldn't be here that day, and Mark Kellums was the person that actually stood up with me. But he was, he's still one of the wisest people I know at, 95, 96 years old. He sent me a letter recently congratulating me on my retirement. mentioned about 3 of our former education reporters. It was just really, really delightful to get that. I've worked with 5 IU presidents. At least 3 of them were mad at me at some point during the time I worked with them. I worked with 4 mayors. Every one of them has been mad at me. John might be mad at me now. I'm not sure, but he's been very good to work with. So was Cruzan, so was Fernandez, so was Tommy. But Tommy came in the first day not the first day, but my first meeting with her, and she said, well, your predecessor, Bill Schrader, was on this board and this board and this board, so I'm just going to put you on those boards. And I said, I do not accept. She said, why? What? And I said, I don't think it's appropriate for the newspaper editor to be on boards in the community, and I'm not going to do it. And that was the first time I made her mad, because she thought, well, if you're not going to be involved, then if you're not going to be looking for solutions, then you're going to be part of the problem, or something like that. I paraphrase, but it was something similar. I've had lots of critics. I would name 2 or 3 of them in particular because they're funny stories with them. I will only name one. It was the 8-year-old that called me earlier, last year. You can still, if you Google my name, you will hear him calling me a shithole because I put it up online. He didn't like that we dropped certain comics. It is true. Very quickly want to talk about, I couldn't have had any success at the HT without all the colleagues that I worked with. I mean, Bob Hamill is the one that everybody knows. Bob was a superior reporter and writer who operated in a different time and era than 2019. He would not have been able to do his job in 2019 the way he did it from 1966 to 1996, because he just was ingrained in the Bob Knight basketball program. But he's in every Hall of Fame there is to be in. So, and he's just a wonderful guy. Scott Schurz, family ownership of the newspaper since 1966. I have to tell a story about Scott. He was a big comics guy too. One day I was just in my office and I got this phone call, and it was Scott. And he said, do you have the paper from, I don't know, someday? He said, turn to page D5. He said, do you see the comic Kathy? And I said, yeah. He said, do you see the comic Doonesbury? I said, yeah. He said, do you see it says Doonesbury on Kathy and Kathy on Doonesbury? And I'm like, yeah, I see that, Scott. He goes, how's that happen? And so he didn't yell at me, but he's just wondering how we can make a mistake like that. And I said, are you going to be in your office later? And he said, no, I'm not. I won't be back for a few days. I said, where are you? He said, I'm in Munich. Anyway, he was a great guy to work for all these years. Some former HT staffers I want to mention. Frank McCloskey was an HT staff member. You might not know that, but Frank was our mayor and he was a congressman. Chuck Crabb, the voice of IU basketball PA announcing, he was an HT staff member at one point. Those of you who like sports, Jason Whitlock, you may see him on Fox Sports these days. Jason, and I can't remember, maybe Ken knows who his partner is on there, Colin Coward maybe, or somebody. They do like a Q&A thing. I hired Jason right out of Ball State, unleashed him on the world. He's been a very opinionated, most hated columnist in Kansas City for a long time. There's a guy named Dan Cadlick who used to be our police reporter. Dan, one day I got a call from Dan. He went on to various papers, and I got a call from Dan. And he said, I just got a new job. I'm going to be a columnist for Time magazine. And I said, they're going to pay you a lot of money to write one column a week? And he goes, oh, I don't have to write every week. Michael Carita, y'all know Michael. He's an author, great young man. He started at our paper. I got a nice note from Chris Corman yesterday. He was our former sports editor. Chris is, he runs a portion of ESPN's sports website now. And John Wertheim, many of you know John's parents, Al and Judy. And John, when he was in high school, worked for our high school publication, although he went by Lewis then. So Lewis Wertheim, who worked for our whole press high school publication, is now the senior editor of, or the executive editor of Sports Illustrated and a correspondent for 60 Minutes. So John is another success story who worked in the HT newsroom. I mention all these because we've had great people. I've had great people to work with over the years. I've got 7 staff members that are working for IU now because they would come in and pay them more money than I could pay them. And the current staff, a bunch of great people that are going to go far. So when you see their bylines, you can trust that they've done their homework and they're doing their job. Okay, I want to give you a 2-minute call for support. I would just ask you to please support your local community, everything that's in it, nonprofits, for-profits, people who are on the streets, whatever. Do whatever you can do to support the community, and that includes the local newspaper. We've been going through a transformation. The revenue model that used to work for us doesn't work for us so much anymore. It's a for-profit entity. Advertising has declined, paid circulation has declined, though readership is up overall because of all the platforms on which we publish information. Without local journalists, I would just ask you, who would tell the stories of the community? Who's going to hold government accountable? Who's going to do those stories like we did last weekend? Who's going to point out the flaws in the community and celebrate the successes? I think it's the local journalists. So I thank you for all the support you've shown me over the years, for all that money you gave for Teacher's Warehouse, for all the tough questions you're going to ask me in the next 5 minutes. It's really been a lot of fun. Thanks. Yes, sir.
What story or stories would you say in your career at the HT gives you the most angst for publishing?
I can tell you one that gives me the most angst to this day is a story and a database we did on people who have carry permits, handgun carry permits. It was a story. The state police used to have a database available. We got it. It was public record. We created a searchable database by block by block, every county of the state of Indiana, so you could see how many people had personal carry permits on your block. You couldn't see who owned the guns. You couldn't see what the addresses of the personal carry permits were. But the NRA learned about it, and they posted a note, sent a note to their membership that said, editor in Indiana equating NRA members to sex offenders. And I got 1,500 calls or emails in the next 10 days. Some of them were incredibly threatening. It was a very difficult time. The NRA posted a map to my house, Mayor Maloney's house, and he was the publisher then, and our digital editor's house on their website. Even though we didn't do anything like that, anywhere close to that. It gave me a really strong appreciation for the pressure that the NRA can bring to bear on individuals. I will also say, for those of you who are in politics, that the very next year, that information became not available to the public in Indiana because of a bill carried by Democratic State Representative Peggy Welch from Bloomington. So that was the one. I don't know if I'd do that again. Yes, sir.
I'm a retired magazine editor and writer, and to move this to a slightly lighter note, I must say that after living in Bloomington for only 2 years, having lived on the East Coast all my life, and I'm a daily subscriber to your paper, something compelled me to pick up Abby Tonsing's crime report one day and read it. And For me, the most memorable item I've read in your paper in 2 years was one little item from Abby Thompson's column reporting that a couple in Bloomington filed, I guess, a police report about a man making an obscene gesture at their dog.
You heard that I have 3 dogs and 2 cats. That's really serious to me. So, yes, sir.
I just want to go to your parting question. Can or will the HD and all the HDs across the country survive, and if so, how?
They'll survive. I just don't know in what form. We're moving more and more digital. News staffs are being reduced, although I have to say that in our case, our news staff has been spared. You know, we've done everything we could do, and some people have lost their jobs. Until October, I think it was October, I may have been the only editor of a paper my size in the country that never laid anybody off. And I've still only laid one person off. He was our videographer, Seth Tackett, and I actually offered him another job, but it wasn't what he wanted. But he was, you know, it's very difficult. Newspapers have to find different streams for revenue. It's, you know, I would just ask you not to complain and moan when the price of the paper goes up $1 a month. Newspapers are making more money, have to make more money on the content that the content generators are producing, and because less is coming in from the advertisers. I would also say, I'm obviously not an unbiased source, but I would say that whenever we do a story on something, anything, I hear from all the people that say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize how many people read your paper. And I just wish advertisers would understand that, because the message in our newspaper still goes to a lot of people with disposable income in our circulation area. Yes.
I'm a daily subscriber, and it's a great newspaper. My question is, do you think that the attacks on media and the press are inspiring people to get into the business, or intimidating people to quiet down?
I don't think it's an intimidation. I don't know that it's driving a bunch of people into the business, but I don't think people who are in it aren't getting out because of the attacks on the press. I think they're fighting harder because they understand that they're so unwarranted and so ridiculous. You know, the thought of the people in the media being the enemy of the people is just, it's laughable to me. People who get in the media want to support the general good of all people. You know, as Jim said, we want to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. So I don't think people are shying away from being in the media once they're in it. But I do know that, as Jim mentioned, I teach some classes at IU, and there are fewer and fewer people, young people, who are going into the journalism track, and more of them are going into, some of them are going straight into management, which I don't really get, but, and some of them, they're going into public relations, advertising, things like that. So, Charlotte?
Yeah. I just want to say, I think there are lots of ways in which the newspaper is important. When I was county commissioner, we had a county reporter, and that was Kurt Vanderdusen. And initially I was told, you watch out for him, he's going to try to get you, which I think he did. But of course, over the time, what he did was push me really hard. You know, he knew the history, he brought the history of the whole Space Needs program. He kept saying, okay, Charlotte, what did you do today to save the courthouse? And I said, oh. And he scared me to death.
Yeah, me too.
He was very important, I think, in the whole process. Just kind of reminding me, bringing the historical process to life for me, and pushing. You know, he stepped overboard sometimes, but he was, without him, I don't know, we could have.
Yeah, Kurt crossed the line a few times. Kurt was one of my absolute favorite people to work with. He was the one really, really staunch conservative that worked in our newsroom. There were others, there have been others, but Kurt was, you know, he would argue with everybody every day about politics in the newsroom. But wonderful guy, taken way too early. He was 59 when he died of lung cancer.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Well, I certainly think being a couple minutes over time here is warranted. Bob, with your comments and everything, thank you for being here today. And our quarterly recognition for our programs are the community kitchen for this quarter. So we'll be making a contribution of you being here today and speaking. Our next week's program will be Aaron Predmore from the Chamber, thanks to Michael Shermis. And our thought for the week, one that you've all heard, I'm sure 1,000 times, particularly yesterday via whatever social media source, from Dr. Martin Luther King is, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And I believe that is often analogous with exactly what Rotary does in our world. We often are the light and the love within our communities and within our world, which is often needed. So I thought that was obviously applicable for yesterday's celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King, and then a celebration of what Rotary does as an organization in our community, in our world. So please join me in reciting our four-way test, which is very applicable as we apply it to... How much money did we raise, Susie? $152. Wonderful. All right, of the things we think, say, and do, first, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And fifth, is it fun? Have a great week, everybody.